Now, more on the news that President Joe Biden is making what could be his last overseas trip as US president, a one-day visit to Berlin. He's fitting plenty in, including being honoured with Germany's Order of Merit Award. He'll also hold talks with the German Chancellor, Olaf Scholz. Those discussions going on right now still, I think. And the French and British leaders, Emmanuel Macron and Sir Keir Starmer, the latter two making special trips to Berlin to take part. Well, let's speak now to our correspondent in Berlin, Jessica Parker. Jessica, hello to you. So a day of ceremony, a day for political discussions as well. We'll talk about the latter first of all, because we heard those comments from President Biden on the death of Yahya Sinwar. So obviously the Middle East on his agenda, Ukraine always as well. As he comes to the end of his presidency, what more progress is he hoping to make on some of those big issues?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. I think if we break it down a little bit, clearly on Ukraine, President Zelensky recently presented what he called his victory plan to President Joe Biden and two other Western leaders as well. And some of the big asks on that, an invitation to join NATO, permission to use Western-made long-range missiles on military targets inside Russia, that hasn't been as of yet forthcoming. And I think Kyiv, I was there a couple of weeks ago, we're really hoping that Joe Biden would use this moment as he comes to the end of his presidency to make big decisions like that. Now, there is still time, but no indication yet that that is going to happen. What he seems to be doing in Berlin, amongst a number of things, but particular on Ukraine, I was just looking at some of his remarks. He was saying that countries who've been supporting Ukraine must sustain our resolve and support. The cost is heavy, but pales in comparison to the alternatives. And he actually picked up particularly on German defence spending and said that Germany must keep up the 2% NATO defence spending target of GDP because it matters, he said. And that is interesting because Germany only just this year got to that 2% spending target after decades of not meeting it. There isn't a long-term plan at the moment in Berlin as to how they are going to sustain that. So I think President Joe Biden, with an eye on who may succeed him in the White House, particularly the possibility of another Donald Trump presidency, is saying to European partners, including Germany, which is, of course, Europe's biggest economy, that they must sustain not just support for Ukraine, but bolstering their own defences as he leaves office. But I'm sure you noticed as well in Berlin, and as the President Frank-Walter Steinmeier paid tribute to Joe Biden, there was a lot of love in the room for the outgoing US president, because here in Berlin, I think those in the sort of political establishment really feel he reset relations after the last Donald Trump presidency.
Yes, just very briefly, Jess, that ceremony, all part of this legacy building for President Biden.
Yeah, I think so. And that is partly about Ukraine, trying to ensure that whoever does succeed in the White House, there will be sustained support for Kyiv after he leaves. But I think, he seemed kind of quite touched, I think, by some of the tributes paid to him and the suggestions from Frank-Walter Steinmeier that he had really revived that transatlantic partnership after the Donald Trump years. But of course, whatever comes next, that is up to the US electorate, while capitals like Berlin and others in Europe will watch on closely.
We'll be talking about the US elections very shortly. But to you in Berlin, Jessica Parker, thank you very much.